Tonight, we're going to get familiar with familials. Familiars, actually. A black cat, a toad, an owl. These are common images that come to mind, but what about a groundhog and an octopus with predictive abilities? Or the birth of a white buffalo that offers a symbol of hope? Would Egyptians who dressed cats in jewels and fed them treats fit for royalty also be said to have familiars? And if a familiar is in reality a beloved animal that offers some intangible magic, where is the line drawn between a familiar and a pet? So join us as we take a little tour through familiars across the ages and contemplate the familiars in our lives.
The program you are about to hear is fiction, science fiction. We make no guarantees, however, how long it will remain fiction.
Well, Slytherin salutations to all you cognonauts and superstitious pigeons out there. Thanks for joining us tonight as we take a minute to talk about familiars, which apparently I want to call familials, as Nick pointed out before the show. But it's going to be a fun one. We're going to talk about what a familiar is and whether you could already have invited one into your home. But first tonight, I'm joined by my two lovely co-hosts, Nick and Mike. Nick, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am nervous. This is like, I'm sweating on that cold open. Woo.
It's not so easy.
Not so easy at all. Mike, how about you? How's it hanging?
Oh, I'm hanging in there. You did great, though.
Oh, you guys. So basically, I just wanted to get down to it and start with the concept of a familiar. Now, before we get into it, Nick and Mike, anything come to mind? Any experience with them?
I mean, well, I've definitely had pets in the past and connections with pets. I think my first sort of connection with a pet was with the snake from my kindergarten class. We used to take care of a little rosy boa, and we used to get to take it home for a week. So, but I would always volunteer to take it home more than once a year or whatever, because some kids didn't want it. So,
Nice.
Yeah.
Very good. Very good. And Mike, how about you?
You got to take a snake home?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you didn't lose it?
No. I mean, it was really gentle. It was a very small sort of. They were called like rosy. I think they're called rosy boas, but they're like rainbow iridescent colors. They're really pretty. Yeah.
I would have lost
so
it.
pretty.
What? Awkward.
You have to tell your mom you lost the snake. Like, oh, there's a snake in the house.
Right.
Yeah, don't worry about it, Ma. It'll be fine. I've had pets too. I guess my first connection with a pet would be a goldfish. Oddly enough, in like
adorable.
second grade, third grade or something. Yeah. And then of course like Harry Potter and things like that. But we could get into it. I've had some weird interactions with animals where they've just let me get close or just seemed really chill when they should not have been.
Yeah, no, I hear that. I think one of my craziest animal, maybe familiar stories was a ferret that I came across as a kid. It was, I think like our neighbor's dog was barking at it and it was really scared. And then I somehow was skating by and I just could snatch it right up. And it was totally nice and docile. And I just thought to myself, like, wow, this wild ferret from nowhere just popped out of nowhere. And it's kind of like my first little animal pet. So,
Nice.
Yeah. Well, so according to Wikipedia, I did a little research on familiars. And there's a lot of history about them, but it's not easy to find. So originally I was going to do the Exobit, 30 minutes. Then I started doing a deep dive into it, and there is a lot. So I'll just start going with one definition. So In European folklore and folk belief of the medieval and early modern periods, familiars, I'm going to be doing this all day, guys, sorry, sometimes referred to as familiar spirits or animal guides, were believed to be supernatural entities that would assist witches and cunning folk in their practice of magic. According to the records of the time, they would appear in numerous guises, often as an animal, but also sometimes as a human or a humanoid figure. And, that was kind of an interesting description, I guess, because you're right. Like, I would think of the Harry Potter familiar and I would think of movies and things. But when you get into the folklore, so much of what we know about familiars is guided by witch trials. And there is a leading scholar named Dr. Victoria Carr, and she has some pretty crazy stories to share. And so I'm just going to skim a couple of them. Now, the first one is called Satan the Cat. There was a witch, her name was Elizabeth Francis, and this was in 1566. And according to her, her grandmother taught her how to be a witch at the age of 12, taught her to renounce God, and gave her a cat named Satan. And she was instructed on how to care for the cat, which included feeding it bread, milk, calling him Satan, that was a big thing, and giving him drops of her blood and making sure that he had a basket to sleep in. So I'm going to stop with that first story and ask Nick and Mike, do you think that that cat was really a Satan cat, or do you think her grandma just gave her a kitten?
It was a Satan kitty.
Yeah.
Satan kitty.
Demon cat. I don't know. I mean, it's interesting that the concept is like you have to call it. It's a very odd thing to do for your grandchild is make them renounce God and worship their cat Satan. So
Right.
Boy, our childhoods must have been way different.
Oh, no.
Right.
Well, and then this. Oh, you're gonna say, Mike?
Well, yeah, it's a strange thing to do, but kind of going back up a little bit, the idea that it not only helped witches, but cunning people as well. I thought that was interesting. So it's not really it removes, I guess, a bit of the occult for me, at least.
Oh, yeah. Well, and that's a really interesting point because you can look at, as far back as the Greeks, the Romans, and the Egyptians, and they all had this. I mean, humans have animals around for a number of reasons. And it was around the 1500s you start to see this shift into no, they're demons in like a little creature, which I thought was kind of a funny thing.
It's kind of like the death rattle of paganism and the birth of the Enlightenment. So
yeah, exactly. In quotes. The Enlightenment in quotes. 'Cause, yeah, you're killing people. But yeah, no, and I thought this was really weird too, though, because in this story of Elizabeth Francis, she goes on to talk about how the cat brought her herbs and she could ask the cat to kill other people. And it's really weird because, okay, so I guess it started out where the cat would carry out her desires. So she would just give it a drop of blood and then ask it for wealth, which in this case was sheep. But so the cat would bring her sheep and then the sheep would die. So then she asked the cat for a rich husband. But the cat said she was required to have sex with this man before marriage. So she did that, and then he left.
Likely story.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Sounds like the cat was a wingman for that dude. It's like, yeah, I'll totally hook you up with my boy, but just so you know, he's not with the chastity stuff.
100%. Well, and then it's crazy because she wants to get rid of, because I guess she gets pregnant from this first guy. So she tells the cat to get her herbs to end the pregnancy, which he does. Then she asks for another husband. Cat says you have to have sex before marriage again. And 3 months after they marry, she has a daughter. So the numbers don't work there. Obviously, everything she asked for her little Satan cat kind of worked, but didn't work.
What a benign request for Satan to give you, Hey, go get some before you settle down. That's my request. That's the rebelling against the system. How far have we strayed as a society?
So tame compared
Yeah.
to today.
Seriously.
Like now we technically all have cats and kind of do it before marriage. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, like, you
Yeah,
know,
it's pretty
you're kind of
common.
expected to do that. If you don't, you looked at like a weirdo, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
100%.
It's just modern morality, though.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
It's expected versus a long time ago when everything was far more conservative, I guess. Or like,
Oh, way more conservative for
yeah,
sure. Yeah.
just these things had like premarital sex had far more weight in those days.
Mm-hmm. Or I wonder too, though, if it's like premarital sex off the books versus on the books, you know? Because there's a case down the way where like this woman, she's sneaking off in the middle of the night and she has a cat, and that becomes the reason that she's called a witch and her cat's a familiar, which like so not fair. Like
Well, I
if she
think,
want to get strange in the middle of the night, she should be able to.
yeah. Well, I think this kind of taps into something about the essence of what magic could be, and it's
Mm.
you know, like when you ask for something, you have to give a sacrifice, and usually when you do make a sacrifice, it's you what you're going to get is not exactly what you wanted or asked for. It is
Mhm.
going to be technically what you asked for, maybe, but it's not really what you want.
Oh, totally.
Especially with blood magic. Blood magic is one of the most like one of the more intense magic forms. And, like as far as occultism goes, so if you do like blood over intention or something like that, yeah, you can have some volatile results.
Mm-hmm. It's a great
Oof.
way to bastardize a mission for sure.
Well, yeah, and it makes me think of the movie The Craft, where they're like, whatever you put out comes back by three or something like that. So yeah, I think definitely there is an element of caution here, and you know, and it continues too with this Elizabeth because at one point she wanted her husband to become lame, like so he couldn't walk very well. And so in the story, her cat turns into a frog. The frog touches the husband's foot, and then he becomes lame. And then at that point, Elizabeth decides to give the cat to a woman named Agnes. And then in 1579, Elizabeth is executed because of her reputation for using familiars. Um, let's see here.
It sounds to me, honestly, it sounds like she brought it upon herself. Sounds like the cat didn't actually do very much for her.
Brought some herbs.
Yeah, brought some herbs and got her laid a couple times.
Right, like the cat can fetch. That's amazing, first of
Uh,
all. And we're not even noticing the fact that the cat can talk, apparently. Like,
No, telepathic.
yeah.
oh, telepathic. I see. I see.
Telepathic demon cat that wants you to get laid.
Right. Who eats bread? I don't know if I've never heard of a cat eating bread, first of all.
Well, and I
But
think just sorry before
that's
I know you're trying to keep it flow, but just one more thing.
Mhm.
It's interesting how that kind of archetype has been around for so long as the crazy cat person.
Yes.
And it's because cats transmit toxoplasmosis, and that can cause insanity. So
Mhm.
if you're around cats, you know, and it's usually, you know, in dirty conditions or unhygienic conditions. So if you're not cleaning up after your cat, or, you know, like you're kissing it, you know, or licking its mouth or whatever, you're going to be prone to getting. And I actually say that pregnant women should not be around cat litter, because it can harm the baby. Yeah.
That's
So
crazy.
cat refuse has a lot of toxins and parasites. So
Dang.
I
That's
always
dirty.
figured, I always figured like that crazy cat persona was just the effect of that parasite.
definitely, yeah,
On
because
humans.
it makes you more risk averse. It makes you less. It makes you very agitated and less risk averse. So you do crazier things.
And you
Oh,
want cats around you all the time.
That's right. Yeah.
yeah, no, I mean, I think a lot of these cases, especially where you have maybe like a witch trial where somebody says like an animal appeared and then somebody died. I mean, like that could have been any number of diseases when you come down to it.
Definitely.
Yep. Yeah, it could have
And I
been
think
anything, but
Yeah, well, and I think Nick, you had a good point the other day about some kind of reason people were sick back then, like the bread.
Oh yeah, ergot poisoning.
Yeah.
That's or not poisoning, but ergot basically. So it was the way they used to store their bread back then during the colonial era and the witch trials and all that kind of stuff is that they usually stored it at very cool, damp areas, and that would create mold. And there's a specific mold called ergot that, if you ingest it, will make you wildly hallucinate. And so they suspect that, at least in the Salem witch trials, what happened was that ergot got into their bread system. Basically, everybody got really high off of ergot.
Oh
And,
no.
and that's when they started claiming people were witches and things like that. So,
Dang. Yeah, no, these trials are out there. And so here's another crazy story. This one, I couldn't really catch the last name. It sounded like Joan Crusick. And so she was told to have had a rat familiar, and she claimed that the rat was the spirit of her dead lover, Mr. Mason. And witnesses would encounter a familiar while sick on. Oh, okay. So a lot of the witnesses back then would see a familiar when someone was sick or on their deathbed, and they would make those associations. But in this case, a gentleman said that he had heard a strange noise when he was sick, and he found a rat and tried to kill it, but the rat escaped. And of course, because this woman Joan had a rat, they just assumed it was the same rat. And then another neighbor said that there was a cat on her daughter's neck, and it was considered to be the same creature that could shapeshift. And so in the trial, one of the lawyers pointed out that the invocation of an evil spirit, aka the use of a familiar, is illegal, and she was executed. So I believe in her case, that was the defining moment where the familiar was the key turning point in the case. But
boy, oh boy.
I mean,
Can we
yeah,
just
like
take a moment and be grateful for the fact that we have modern laws? I mean,
yes,
I mean, for real though. Like,
dude,
you
that's
think
so
about
messed
it. Somebody sees a cat that you pet, and then all of a sudden you're executed.
100%. Yeah, I mean,
That's
like,
why.
Yep.
yeah. Look, if you want to call your rat your dead lover, Mr. Mason, like you should be able to, without persecution.
Yeah. But the invocation
Really.
of an evil spirit that could shapeshift.
Mhm.
This is almost sounding like Skinwalker type stuff, though.
It does. I'm glad that you highlighted that. Yeah, because shapeshifting apparently is another key feature that we find with a lot of familiar stories. And yeah, the Navajos, they have a thing called the skinwalkers, which it could be like there's a coyote in front of your house, but that's really a person in coyote, clothes. But I know other cultures have that concept too, no?
Yeah. I mean, I think shapeshifting is one of those common threads that multiple cultures share, right?
I would think so. I mean, like, and this is just based on here's my 80s film, Thunderheart, which is really good. It's got Val Kilmer in it, and he's like an urban native who reclaims his identity when he goes home as an FBI agent to solve a case. But there's an activist character there, and they say that he can shapeshift into like an eagle and fly away and stuff. So I know like there's a lot of stories, at least in native lore, about shape-shifting and
Well, it's
not.
interesting.
Oh
Oh,
yeah.
sorry.
Oh no, I was just rambling.
No, I just think it's interesting because I think that, yeah, maybe like you're talking about shape shifting stories around the world, and I'm thinking about it right now, and I'm like, I think most of the European stories of shapeshifters are people who are cursed. So it's
Yeah.
interesting that it has a negative connotation in more of the European sort of aspects, because I'm even thinking in like Asian cultures, the idea of emperors turning into dragons when they die, like that's not a
Mm,
negative thing.
that's true.
Um, but it seems as though there's a negative sort of connotation to the idea of shapeshifting in the European sense, because it doesn't seem to be I mean, maybe in certain Latin American cultures as well, but it doesn't seem to be certainly a negative thing for other cultures.
Hmm. Yeah, I would agree with you. I love the dragon image too because I forgot about that one. But yeah, but there's also like in the Pacific Northwest, you have the dancers, like you'll have people that have the what is it? Like the totem bird,
Mhm.
and it's like really pretty, and they'll transform, quote unquote, to create a more powerful ceremonial experience. So
Yeah,
I think
like the
that's kind of
Chinese
interesting.
dancers with the dragon.
Yes. Oh,
Mhm.
totally. Yeah. And so I think that's interesting. You have that kind of maybe more, those more paganistic roots that are somehow perceived totally
Well,
bad.
yeah. Well, maybe it is. I think that's probably it, especially for the Western sort of society, because a lot of this has to do with like the original religion was animism.
Mm,
So, yeah, I think it has roots to that sort of like primordial sort of religion where everything had a spirit and everything was animated.
hmm
And then, of course, with the advent of modern religion, that had to be removed from culture. So
hmm Yeah. Oh, yeah. I love it. Mike, did you want to add anything?
But I'm just thinking about like the old berserkers, like the Vikings. They would, if I remember correctly, take some form of hallucinogenic mushroom or something like that,
Amanita muscara, yeah.
and
What?
bring in the spirit of an animal, like a bear, some ferocious warrior type animal, before they would go to war. And in a way, that's shape shifting, but on a spiritual
What?
level.
Hmm.
Yeah. No, that's crazy. Vikings did that
Yeah, they used to eat Amanita muscara mushrooms and then pillage.
while like some sort
The
of animal.
berserkers. Only
Yeah,
the
That's
because
berserkers.
Amanita muscaria is different than psilocybin mushrooms. It gives you a different sort of experience and a lot more visceral physical experience. So they became kind of like possessed, and they were called the berserkers because they acted in a berserk way.
oh my
Well, I
gosh.
mean, the word berserk came from that. So
Yeah. Well, could you imagine being in one of these towns that are getting pillaged by like, no, thank you. That would be
by high
frightening.
Vikings.
Yeah, just screaming,
Yeah,
different guttural sounds, and that's it.
Yeah,
yeah.
they probably think that they're making animal sounds, but like for a normal human, it's just like, ah. Well, this is good. And this is great because it's actually, we're going to circle back after I get through these little stories. So let me try to make them a little shorter. Now, Joan Prentice, she met her familiar 6 years before her trial, allegedly, at 10 p.m. at night. And before her, oh, so she's just hanging out in her bedroom at 10 o'clock one night, and a gray ferret with fiery eyes appears out of nowhere. And it stands up with its front paws and it speaks to her and says, "Give me your soul." But she says no. And the ferret says, "I then must have some of your blood." The ferret also calls itself Bid. It jumps on her lap and takes more blood and says, "If you would have me do anything for you, I am and will always be ready for your command." And in the evening, she could call him to her side, saying, "Come, Bid," multiple times, and he would appear. And she asked him to bite her neighbor, but when he goes to bite the neighbor, he reports that he accidentally kills the neighbor. So she gets mad at him and he disappears. And then she's on trial, and then she proceeds to tell everybody that it wasn't actually her intention to kill her neighbor, it was Bid. And in her story, she said that anybody could call Bid. So if you dare and you want a ferret familiar with fiery eyes that will not do what you want it to do, you can just go home tonight and say Bid a bunch of times. I won't, but you could.
I'm before we go on, I really need to say that I think Demon Ferret shirt is the next shirt.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
Like, I think I'm gonna design a shirt that's like a little ferret with red eyes and it says "Give me your soul."
That's amazing.
Oh my God. Now, would you add the "I am Bid" to that? Because
I mean, either way.
of all names, that's the worst name. I don't think like are there any Satan names that go with Bid?
Yeah, Set or Baal or Beelzebub or
Wait, Baal is one of them?
it's a Baal is like an old Assyrian sort of god before the more modern god, or not god, but demon. So,
Okay. I was
yeah.
gonna say, because that's such an innocuous word that like you think that with our Puritan background we would have changed balls into like
It's
something not
Baal.
ball.
It's Arabic.
Oh, okay. I feel dumb. Mike, anything come to mind with the ferret of Joan Prentice?
I'm just imagining this ferret just always stuck in an auction house, just with people saying bid constantly.
I
And
love
just
it.
getting more and more pissed off.
Yeah, he's just been like, man, I should have changed my name a long time ago.
I knew it was dumb.
You don't
Or
see
he's
this happening with Puxatawny Phil.
Puxatawny Phil. That's
Can't
true.
even find the right human to steal their soul.
Yeah. Or like maybe even in these days, he's like, these humans don't have any souls. They're used up. I need soulful humans. Where are they? Oh man. Well, okay, so moving on, we have Elizabeth Clark. And so now with the trial of Elizabeth Clark, you have the emergence of these self-appointed witch hunter generals. One was Matthew Hopkins, one was John Stern. And so they decided that Elizabeth was a witch because someone reported her as such. And she was able to call her familiars, which was a white kitten, a fat spaniel dog without any legs, a long-legged greyhound dog with a head like an ox that transformed during the trial to a headless 4-year-old and ran around the room and then out the door. They also, in their notes, talk about a black rabbit that could enter your throat and turn into toads inside your belly, along with many other strange creatures. And some witnesses claim that the familiars were sent to kill horses and cows or to cause horses to unseat their riders.
I have a question.
Yes, go for it.
Was there like a gas leak in the 1600s? Like, why were people seeing dogs turning into oxes, turning into babies in trials? How is it? Seriously, like that's a real question. If they're saying that that happened in the trial, that means people saw that happen?
Well, so it's all about who wrote what happened. So, so Hopkins, he actually ends up getting really rich because he starts writing these books about what to look for when you're trying to find a witch, and that he can help you get rid of witches and he'll put them to trial. And his wealth really grew. And it's really messed up because sometimes all you had to do to be a witch was to be a single older woman with.
A spinster.
Well, yeah, some of these reports, it was like she had a hairy lip and a cat witch.
Done. That's like the Monty Python sketch. She's a
Is
witch.
there
How
one?
do you know she's a witch? Well, she looks like one.
Yeah. It couldn't be further from the truth. And I dove really deep into this. And actually, what's weird is that this Hopkins character, he used this book. So I guess like King James at the time, he had a wife that was going to be on a ship going from Denmark to Scotland to get married, but there was like this crazy storm, and so the ship sank, and he had to go to Denmark to pick her up. And Denmark was having a big witch scare, and the king got like really alarmed by what he was hearing, and then some witch. I guess like there was a woman that stowed away on the ship or something. They get back to Scotland. There's a witch accused, and he somehow meets with her, like has an audience with her, which is really rare. But she confesses to causing the storm that hurt these ships. And that was like hands down his, like, he's like, okay, that's valid. We got to take care of this. So he writes a second book. And so like there's a book that has an inscription from the bishop at the time, so it has the appearance that the church is behind it. And then when the king co-signed on it, then you have all these witch finders that just like took these books and went crazy with it. So I guess this is life before the internet, when you can fact check stuff, maybe.
Well, I wonder if life was just more boring back then too, so they added this whole layer of mysticism to like hunt for witches, and it ended up really bad for a lot of people.
Yeah, well, and one of the stories I heard, it was actually some guy, he was like had what's the word, enamored with a servant girl in his area, and she wouldn't be with him. So he accused her of being a witch and tortured her until she admitted to being one. So it's just kind of, I think, like a lot of hearsay and a lot of like groupthink, when you get down to it.
Yeah, like I wonder how many or how often they're like, yeah, in that court there was a dog that turned into an ox, and then that message just got like, yeah, I actually do remember that. That did happen. Oh my god, she is a witch. I wonder if there was a lot of
Or
cases like that.
Oh, yeah. Well, they even had some cases where, like, they would bring a child in to testify against her own mother, and the child's so impressionable, and imaginative, just goes off and says all this stuff. And I mean, like, with the familiar that can appear and reappear, it's quite easy to say, "Oh, well, you didn't see that? Oh, it was really fast. You missed it,"
Or
Um,
or
or
maybe there were
it
just a
really,
lot of witches around.
I mean,
Maybe.
maybe.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, like,
Did,
either it's just a mass hallucination, or maybe there were some witches around.
It's possible.
and
Maybe
this was
they
like,
just. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, now it's like this was the whole calling to go underground,
Hmm.
all
Maybe.
trials.
Oh, gosh. Okay, well, if that's the case, then you really don't want to hear about some of these male witches, uh, because they did have witches that were men. Most of them had rats that, like this one guy, John, I didn't get his last name, but he found a rat in his house. And in order to get the rat to get blood from him, because this is like a big defining moment, he put a box on his stomach and encouraged the rat to starve until it went for blood. And then it became his familiar, which I think is some serious dedication. And then there was another male witch. His name was John Bishop, and he had 6 snail familiars. That's right, guys. I said snail. Their names were Sidrake, Jeffrey, Peter, Elward, and Hyman. And each one of them could target another animal. So he could send one snail to hurt a sheep, another snail specializes in hogs, and so on.
I'm calling BS.
He even had a snail that offended Christians, or that targeted Christians.
Payment, private.
Hyman.
I mean, what? So, like, he would send a snail and be like, "Okay, snail, I'll see you in a month when you come back from down the street." Like, I
Right.
don't know.
Yeah, well, I don't know how he employed the snails. There's not a lot more details on that particular one, but I do know that they say that they can shapeshift. So my guess is he just found the animals that couldn't run away, and he dubbed them his familiars and said, okay, well, they can shapeshift and they can do this, that, and the other. But I do think it's interesting that a lot of these cases, the evidence is from them harming other animals, right? Because a horse can kick a rider off just because it's mad, and cows can die for all kinds of reasons. So to me, it seems like there's an element of revenge in a lot of this witch naming.
Yeah, and also too, like, you're not gonna say that my horse is untrained and it kicked you. Like, obviously you're a witch.
Right.
Or,
Right.
obviously I don't. I know how to run a dairy farm, so my cow should be alive. But now that they're dead, it was a witch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like that for sure.
Yeah. Well, I think obviously the changing of the times as well, because what, 16 something in what, Europe, England primarily?
Mm.
I mean, that's getting right out of the Middle Ages, and heading towards, like the Renaissance is happening in Italy. People are starting to, utilize science more. There's
Mm-hmm.
going to be more art that might be more subversive to the narrative. And so the response from the church is to do things like the Spanish Inquisition. And, basically it's like there were two, the Renaissance spooked the church because, the church kept society in the Dark Ages for a few hundred years. And so this was kind of like a doubling down from the church, in light of this new sort of, thought forming in Europe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, definitely. And I wonder too, to what extent some people might have actually thought themselves to be witches, because when you look at these cases, one of the things that familiars give is power to those who lacked it. And in some of the cases, a familiar would appear to the witch during a traumatic event, like a near death or an accident or something like that. So I think that's kind of interesting too.
Well, and then how much of this magic that they're practicing was just technology passed on by secret society? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Oh,
So,
yeah.
like, so I mean, like, you have secret societies, especially during around those times. Like, America was invented by a secret society. So, like, you have these secret societies that would circumvent the church and hide sort of like occult information in their ritual. And so, yeah, I wonder how much of that was just kind of like a, like medicine. They could
Oh,
use
definitely.
herbs and stuff like that. That could have been passed down by some sort of secret society for generations. Like ever since the burning of Alexandria, we've been utilizing secret societies to hold information. So
That's going to be a new show or episode for sure. But even just if you're like in a rural area, like the countryside, people that live in the country, they know the plants and animals that are in their vicinity, and their grandparents tell them stuff like, oh, if you're sunburned, that plant over there is really good. And then if it works and you're shown to have healing abilities, well, you see this shift here where being a healer is now bad. And it's a symbol of being a witch. And the same thing too with midwives. There were a lot of midwives that were killed during this time because, again,
they were too good.
Yeah, they were too good. Which I'm like, what? That's crazy.
You mean you haven't let a single woman die during childbirth? Nah.
Terrible. Yeah, it's awful.
You're using some black magic.
Mm-hmm. And so now the other interesting thing is that so many of these stories that come out came about when a witch was tried under torture. So I guess my question to each of you is that if you had to make up a story about a familiar, what would it be and what could it do? And bonus points if you had a snail familiar.
Wow.
Well, I mean, are we talking about so I guess a familiar is anything that a demonic force could do?
Yes, yes. So a
basically.
familiar that we're seeing, yeah, they can shapeshift. They can really be any creature that could house a daemon or a demon.
I would make mine a butterfly that whispers in people's ears and drives them crazy.
Wow.
Isn't that just Twitter?
Yeah. I mean, it's a bird, but yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Oh, wow. That's a digital familiar.
Yeah.
Digital demon, actually. But
digital demon. Oh, gosh, I love it. That needs to be a shirt. Digital demon.
That's pretty good.
What about you, Mike?
I don't know. I guess I'm stuck between like a mole rat and a hawk.
Oh, a mole rat. Go
mole
hawk.
rat to dig me out of the holes, and a hawk to grant me that foresight, that far sight. Obviously they can shapeshift and whatnot, but to have future events, even if I guess in this case it will all be like really bad future events with all these stories the way they play out, but that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah.
Or maybe digging me out of a hole would just put me into a void somewhere, but I think it would be some fun times.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, well, I definitely feel like size is an important thing when it comes to a familiar, because you don't want anything too big. Like, you don't see people having like oxen for familiars. It's not really expedient for evil doing, is it?
It's kind of hard to hide an ox.
They come to your door and you put like a blanket over it, but you can still see it, and you're like, no, it's not there.
Just open your eyes and there's an ox in front of you.
I think an ox would be a great one to hide, because most of these people were agrarian anyways. You just throw them in the barn. Nobody would suspect the ox.
That's true. Nobody would suspect you.
Nobody would suspect the butterfly.
That's true. That's why. That's why I chose the butterfly.
Wow.
There's the monarch butterfly. It kind of has its own shady symbolism.
Yes, it does.
Does it really? Do tell.
Oh, well. That's pretty deep. There's a project called Project Monarch, and it's a Unconfirmed governmental project about mind controlling in popular culture.
What?
Yeah.
But
Creepy.
if you watch a lot of movies, you'll start to see a monarch butterfly symbolism. And
Mhm.
I don't know why. It just might be the go-to, like for a bunch of people working. But it is curious. It is, especially in the way they use the symbol. as well.
It's definitely a magical symbol for transformation, so I think it reinforces the illusion they're trying to create. But I mean, it definitely could be something else too. So
A familiar
Goodness.
that makes you go
Yeah.
crazy.
that's
Yeah.
right.
100%. Well, and so what I would like to do is shift away from these witch trials and start to look at possible familiars in other instances, because I think you're right on the money. You could have these crazy witch demon familiars, but it could also be that we've always sort of had familiars, which would be creatures that protect or give power or do something to benefit us, and that are somehow revered in some way. So, for example, in the ancient Grecian times, there were some that believed in daemons, and even I think Socrates talked about having what's a personal spirit that guided a person's action, which I think is interesting because, getting into the concept of a spirit and something maybe other than yourself informing you, whether that's coming from your own mind or a mythical creature. I just wonder about that a little bit, if that was kind of like a distinguishing point from some other thought before that. Like, what do you think people thought voices in your head were?
There's like the muses, right? Like they maybe the voices in your head were the muses, and they
Mhm.
guided you to create different artworks or different works in general. It was like that guiding voice.
Yeah. Yeah. Or you have like the little angel on your shoulder and the little demon on your shoulder telling you to do good things or bad things.
Yeah,
It's just,
they're outward manifestations of an inner mechanism in our consciousness.
Mhm. Yeah, well, and I think it's interesting that the Greeks also talked about mythical creatures, and I know we'll talk about this more in a separate episode, but I mean, how different is a centaur from what, a dog with a ox for a head or whatever it was? Um, like, why would they make such crazy creatures? What was the point of that?
Well, to keep you out of the maze. You don't want to go into the maze. There's a centaur in there.
That's true, and
Oh,
maybe
that's
it's
the
that fear
Minotaur.
of nature.
Oh,
Oh, Minotaur.
Minotaur, the
I'm an
bull
idiot.
head, the man with the bull's head. Yeah,
No.
really creepy. That's actually Baal. So the Minotaur is actually a remnant from the Babylonian Baal, which was a bull god that they sacrificed to. And so the Greeks took that and created sort of the mythology of the Minotaur, which was given sacrifices through people in the labyrinth.
You mean like blood? Like they gave it blood and asked it to do things for them?
No, actually, the Babylonians used to have a giant cow statue made of iron, bull statue made of iron that they would open up and then put usually children inside and burn alive.
Yep.
That's what,
Nice.
that's what they did.
My jaw just fell open.
You have to fulfill the god's needs, right?
That's right.
That's crazy. But what I mean though is that, like, we were talking about blood sacrifices and
Mhm.
familiars in the witch trials. It's just interesting to me that when you go all the way back, that's something
Well,
to
blood
a more
sacrifice has been
extreme
around
level.
for a very long time. Yeah.
Right, right. It's creepy.
Across a bunch of cultures. I mean, the Aztecs, right?
Hmm.
Mhm.
20,000.
I think they did once. Like one day was 80,000.
Yeah, 20,000 day
Yeah.
average, I think. But yeah, no, that's a lot of blood sacrifices to get
That's a lot of
magic
hearts
cranking.
being ripped out.
Seriously. I don't mean, like, you'd have, like, is it just like 10 people doing all 80,000, or is it 80,000 people doing 80,000?
No,
I
so
mean,
basically,
you're
like
tired.
a priest stood on top of the pyramid, and they all came from each direction of the slaves, and then walked up gradually. And one person, heart cut out, another person, heart cut out, another person, heart cut out, like
God,
just all day.
that's terrible. And that reminds
Unless
me. Oh, go ahead.
unless you were extremely lucky where they thought one of the gods was like living in you. So you went through
Oh,
this
right.
year-long ritual of basically living the best life. Like everything was free. You could do kind of whatever you wanted because you were that
Special.
culture's god.
Hmm.
Oh, man.
But
And
at the end of the year,
and then
Uh-oh.
they kill you.
they take your heart out.
So you just get a whole year of waiting around. That would drive me nuts.
And we're gonna have to do a human sacrifice episode for sure.
Definitely. Definitely. Well, and like, oh, go ahead. Sorry. I keep cutting you off and then I forget.
No, go for it. Because I was gonna dive into daemons and a little bit of like computer
Ooh.
science type stuff.
Oh, no, please do.
So daemons, if you replace the I with an E, you can. There's several different definitions that you can use, but one of them is a computer program that runs another computer program, and this just kind of runs in the background and does whatever the hell it wants or whatever it's supposed to do. And much like this daemon, the voices inside your head, these processes that run in the background and kind of dictate what you do. And this is kind of echoed in Mr. Robot. There's actually an episode called Daemons where this idea kind of gets more played out on the computer side, but it ties back to this ancient Greek idea of a daemon.
Ooh. I'm going to have to look that up. That's kind of creepy and cool at the same time.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting to me too with the human sacrifice thing and just the Greece and things. So when you start looking at Egypt, now I don't know that they did sacrifices in Egypt. I mean, they definitely did at one point sacrifice cats, and it kind of went from one way to the other. So, of course, they worship deities, and apparently cats were praised for killing venomous snakes and protecting a really specific pharaoh sometime in the first dynasty of Egypt. But then you also will find the function of cats indicated in the Book of the Dead. Now, are either of you familiar with the Book of the Dead? I'm not too familiar with it, but I think it's interesting that you have cats represented as raw, and kind of like a life energy, but then being talked about also as these like gatekeepers too.
No, I don't have much experience with the Book of the Dead. Nick?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't read it. I know of it, obviously. But I think it's interesting because there is a lot of lore around cats and the concept that they're kind of like 1 foot in, 1 foot out creatures. And I think it's because they stare off into the distance a lot and they seem to be looking at things that aren't around. So there was this, old belief that cats were seeing something that we were not seeing. So it probably has to do with that's probably something to do with their connection to the spirit world.
Yeah.
I can see that. Or cats are aliens.
Yeah.
Or that.
There's always that.
I mean, they domesticated themselves, right? It seems kind of suspicious that you would want to hang out with a bunch of humans.
That is
Yeah,
suspicious.
I mean, you got to think the first humans, one of the first humans that societies that took you in basically made you gods.
Yeah, that's true.
And we wonder why they have such attitudes now.
I was a god once. Well, I think it's funny though, because I didn't know this, but at one point the Egyptians sacrificed the cats to the gods. So they would mummify them and put them in with like their owner or with pharaohs, or they would sacrifice a whole bunch when they really wanted something to happen. And then there was a shift where you don't kill them at all, and you could be killed for trying to kill a cat. So I thought that was kind of interesting to see how the interaction would shift.
Cats also play a huge part in plague management, and so that's one of the things that cats are very useful for, is keeping the rat population down, which is helps stop the spread of diseases as well.
But I guess I was pointing it out more in if you think of Hocus Pocus or witchy movies or things like that, oftentimes you'll see them doing like a witch's brew or some sort of sacrificing of like a rabbit's foot or a cat paw or something like that. So I thought that was kind of interesting that you can have a familiar that works with you, and then you can also have an animal as like an ingredient, which is kind of weird.
I think it's like that invocation of an evil spirit that would separate the two, right? Like your ingredient may not have the bid spirit or whatever, but your familiar does have that Mephistopheles in it.
Like the difference of the Aztec sacrifice. So you have some cats that you just rip the heart out of, and you have others that you feed and fatten up for a year, and then you do
Rip
it
the heart
in.
out of yeah, exactly.
Oh God. Oh man. Well, and so what's crazy is like with the Egyptians, the Roman emperors, they started to come in and they curtailed the practice of paganism and pagan rituals in Egypt. And then death penalties for offenders were introduced in 395, and a lot of pagan temples were smashed and broken. So I do think it's really interesting that you have these rises in paganism and worshiping, and then you have this like stamping down of that practice too. So for whatever that's worth, but which is hypocritical.
People don't like pagans.
They don't, man.
Mm-mm.
And then what's odd is that in ancient Rome, you have kind of a similar thing where you'll see like guardian serpents on imagery near doorways and things like that. Um, so in some ways, they also understand that like animals have a function. If they don't call it a familiar, they might call it a tutelary deity. That's basically a spirit that protects the house.
Mhm.
So I thought
Like-
that was kind of weird.
Yeah, like the foo dogs in Asia.
Yes, exactly. Which are interesting because the ball that it puts its claw on, if you look closely, is usually the flower of life imprinted on it. So I don't know. Again, little animals protecting stuff.
Is this where we kind of get our idea of like guard dogs?
Probably.
Yeah, they used the Chinese utilized guard dogs like thousands of years ago. They were Shih Tzus though, so that might not be true. It might be Japanese. But I think Shih Tzu is Chinese. So
I can't get off the image of like an army of Shih Tzus, like all fierce and scared.
yeah,
Could you imagine going to the afterlife and having to explain that?
right.
So what happened to you? Can we skip this? Is there a
Well, and I think it's interesting too. We talk about the ancient Rome and the serpent guardian sort of thing, and I don't know where it first originated, but the serpent is kind of the archetype of knowledge and information, and I'm not exactly sure where that came from exactly as far as like the first instance of it, but obviously it has biblical roots in it, and it has other cultural roots. The winged serpent Quetzalcoatl in Aztec culture.
what is it in Yongmor? I can't even pronounce it. The giant snake from
Norse.
yeah.
I can't pronounce any of the Norse stuff.
Yorgamir?
It could have been Jorgamir or something like that. Yeah.
No, I gotta look it up. I'm gonna feel bad if I don't know.
Well, while you do, if you're Googling it now, I thought it was interesting also. Well, first, just about the snake. I wonder if that's because, like, let's say you're living outside or you're exposed to snakes where snakes live. There's a lot of different species of snake. And so, like, you have to somehow kind of know which ones are poisonous and which ones aren't. And maybe know what things to use to fix a snake bite, like suck out the venom or maybe apply something to the wound. So I wonder if maybe that's kind of how the serpent became associated with wisdom, because you have to learn each different one to.
Yeah, most people didn't though. They just died because there was no ability for them to
Fair
not
enough.
be killed by venomous snakes.
Yeah.
I mean,
So harsh.
that might be the thing. Like, if you could handle snakes, or if you knew your way
Maybe.
around snakes, then you were wise, or you
Right.
had some magical power about you. Because
Oh, yeah.
That's
all the
possible,
other
yeah.
humans just died.
Yep. And then
Yeah.
like 100 years later, you're too good, so you get killed.
It's a cycle.
It's a total cycle. Well, and and I guess I should ask this question now. Do you think it's possible for history to repeat itself in terms of midwives, herbalists, and people who do magical things being persecuted? Because we do have the internet and we have science and we have all that stuff that we just assume is going to protect against this kind of thing. But is it possible that we could see like magical people being
Here's my hot take.
your hot take? Okay.
Here's my hot take. It is already happening. We're just not hunting down magical people.
Who are we hunting down?
I don't really want to get into the politics. But let's just say that there is a sort of cultural witch hunt at the moment for the wrong thinkers, so and I think that that's just me. Like, my answer is yes, history does repeat itself. We might not be focusing on witches and magic and all of this sort of esoteric stuff, but we are substituting and plugging and playing for more modern archetypes, to fit our current paradigm. These thought forms like witch hunting are as old as we are, and there's things that just pop up in humanity over the ages randomly, and it's something that we have to beat down every time, and it's just something that's intrinsically with us, just the same thing as like renaissances are intrinsically with us. Dark ages are intrinsically with us. These are thought form complexes that shape humanity and reoccur over time. So yes, the concept of a witch hunt sort of thing, they did it in the Inquisition. They did it with with religion, and they've been doing it for a long time. And yes, it does come back, but we've adapted it for our secular world.
Well, I mean, I guess to add to that, I think a lot of the group thinking is what comes to my mind. The idea that I think Malcolm Gladwell, he has a book, The Tipping Point, and I mean, you see it. It's just kind of like you could have one person say someone's a witch, and then 2 people say it, and then 10 people say it, and then it's declared as fact.
Well, and it's interesting the way that we get possessed by ideas, right? So
thought demons.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, we're joking, but these are viruses, mind viruses that continuously pop up through history, and it's nothing that we can ever really eradicate, because it's part of our nature. It's a part of our physical coded nature to have these sort of mind viruses pop up.
What do you think, Mike?
I would agree that, like, obviously witch hunts still exist today, but I still feel like it comes down to some esoteric thing over your soul, like whether your soul is good or bad, and the mob gets to decide if it's good or bad. And I think there is some, like, it is modernized, but I think it goes beyond the political. Right.
Well, yeah. Oh, no, I would agree with that. I actually just watched this really shitty movie over the weekend. I'm not even going to admit what I was watching, but there is a really cool distinction that one of the characters made between morality and ethics. And I thought it was worth repeating. Morality is more about the self and how you govern yourself, and ethics is about the collective. And, I mean, I would argue if we're in a kind of social contract theory-based society, it seems to me that the ethics are changing, even though the morality isn't. Or
No,
maybe it should be the other way around.
Morality and the ethics are changing. Everything's changing.
Well, I guess it's the line of, what do I tell myself I need to do better, and what do I get to tell other people they get to do better?
Okay,
and I
then
think
it's
that's a really philosophical.
Well, then we're not asking the first question. We're only asking the second.
Yeah. And I think that's an interesting thing is, in your pursuit of ethics, can you lose your morality? Definitely. And I think that's kind of what these cases would show. Like this witch hunter guy, Hopkins, was a horrible human. He murdered like 300 people and profited from it.
The road to utopia is paved in blood.
The road to what?
Who said that?
The road to utopia is paved in blood.
Yeah.
Or like the path, the path to hell is paved with good intentions.
But
Yeah,
do you
there's a
think
lot.
he was? Do you think he was really like, we have to find these witches, or he's like, this is a good way to make a profit?
Well, I know he was a lawyer that failed at being a lawyer, And so he found a new way to transfer his skills.
You also have to
And
think that probably the average IQ of these people was around 75. So
Yeah,
damn.
if you're a bit smarter, you can dupe them.
yeah, I mean, like it's not that difficult to consider that maybe people who were uneducated and didn't have any grasp of science were thinking that there was spiritual mumbo jumbo happening all over the place.
Well, I love there's a one priest. So Hopkins gets really famous and he's traveling all over the place doing his thing. And then there was like a lowly priest somewhere in some shit town or whatnot, and he just was incensed. He just was pissed off. He couldn't take it anymore. He couldn't keep quiet. So he writes like a little booklet and publishes it, and it's damning. I mean, he just talks all the flaws and all the shit about this witch hunter guy. And people were like, no, you're right. Because he was basically taking so much money that it was like these people were all about the witch killings, but then it was coming out of their pockets. And so this one priest was like, just speaking truth. And then you see a shift back into reason when it came down to people's pocketbooks. So I don't know. I mean, like, I think again, that's a case too, where they were all about the ethics of killing the witch and everything. But then when it individually affected them, they started to shift out. So I think like there's something to be said for that tension there.
Yeah, people will always have I think when a situation becomes personalized, like it affects their personal life, then their outlook on the whatever it is changes, especially when it comes to matters of social purity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's a good segue into folk tales, because one of the things that I thought was interesting going back to ancient Rome is the character in a book of satyr-like adventures. This is like an old story, but it's Qui fut rana nunc est rex, which is the man who was once a frog is now a king. And of course, that's an allusion to the Frog Prince story. But there's other stories like Beauty and the Beast or Red Riding Hood. There's another one, Rumpelstiltskin. And these are cases where you have animals having some sort of magic power that can transform or cause harm or put a curse on someone. And I just think about the background of these folk tales. Like, what was the message behind some of these stories? Like, if you were to glean a lesson from, say, the Frog Prince or Beauty and the Beast, could there be something to that in terms of the relation of the witch and a familiar kind of character?
Well, I think I think the fables and the morals to those stories are about outward appearance versus inward appearance or inward reality, right? So the
Mm-hmm.
frog is actually a prince. The princess doesn't want to kiss him because it's a frog and it's gross. She has to take a leap of faith to kiss the prince and change him back. Same thing with Beauty and the Beast.
Mm-hmm.
The beast is a horrible, monstrous figure. Belle doesn't want to have anything to do with him. Eventually, she sees him as the man who he really is on the inside, and then their love transforms him back. So it's like it's all metaphor, and it's metaphor for the notion that even the most wretched of us have the ability to be royalty if we honor our true selves.
I like
Uh,
that.
Although I do find the perspective of Beauty and the Beast, like Beast being the familiar, and like her taking the leap into accepting that he's the familiar. I need to rewatch Beauty and the Beast now. Sounds far different.
Right? He could be Ball, and she's like actually a witch who wants to get wealthy, so she transforms this beast into a rich man. She gets a major come up. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I was reading that, and it just kind of made me think about everything. Like, I wonder. And even Beauty and the Beast. Let's see here. I have a note. Ancient Indo-European cultural tradition that stretched from Scandinavia to Southeast Asia. the outermost lines, common heritage and stories. Okay, I don't know what my note is here, but I had some theory about the fact that some of these stories are super, super, super old. And it was probably some like idea that they all kind of revolve around some common core truth. But I do like the case of Little Red Riding Hood, because I think that's also a story of, a human versus nature and the fear that comes with the forest and the unknown. But also too, what this wolf. What is the story again? It's like the wolf and the mom. It pretends to be your grandma. Is that what it is?
Yeah, the wolf swallows the grandmother whole and waits for Riding Hood to come to her grandmother's house. And the wolf wears the grandmother's clothing. And Red Riding Hood figures out that it's the wolf. And, well, actually, the wolf swallows her too. And it's the huntsman that has to cut the wolf open and let out Red and the grandma. So
That is so much creepier. And I mean, doesn't that tie in beautifully to this, right? I mean, again, what you have a creature that ingests the soul of something or that has some, like, I don't know, that like, you could kind of unpack that a little bit or read into it.
Get to like the belly of the beast sort of thing, right? You go in there, but the interesting thing is that it's an external force that kind of cuts both of them out.
mhm.
Like this demon or the wolf that eats not only an adult, the grandmother, but also the child. And both of them, I guess, can't figure their own way out, so they need that external huntsman to come and cut the demon open and pull out these two people.
Yeah, I mean, it could be that. Well, it has me thinking on Pinocchio, right? Where the whale swallows them.
Monstro.
Yeah, why are animals swallowing humans like all the way whole? They don't
Well,
do
you
that.
have the story of Jonah and the whale too, right? In the Bible, that was literally the story. Which Jonah is tasked by God to go and be a great man and do great things. Jonah doesn't want to do so, and so so Jonah gets swallowed by a whale and then swam around and then basically taken around the world in the belly of a whale. And then when he emerges, he finally does what God wants him to do. So it was his punishment to go around the world in the belly of a whale. But it's the concept of the underworld and it's the chaos and like there's a lot of Joseph Campbell and Young and a lot of those archetypal sort of hero story things that really touch upon the belly of the beast.
Yeah, Jordan B. Peterson has an excellent. There's tons of lectures on this that are really good. But I wonder too if it's a symbol for allowing the animal to take over in you, like whatever, like your animalistic side to completely eat the human side. And it's not only until you go through that, through the belly of your own beast, whatever it may be, you're swimming carefree around in the world because you have no responsibilities. You're an animal, whatever. It's only until you overcome that where you get to return back to your human form and pick up these responsibilities that you either dropped or ignored.
And it's kind of the illustration that responsibility and carrying a burden is what separates us from the lower primordial chaos of animalism.
Oh, we're so much better than them.
Totally. Well, and that's a really great point. I mean, I think, like that idea that you have to destroy the animus and then emerge as this enlightened human or whatnot. Totally different from what you see in maybe native lore or neo-shamanism and power animals or spirit animals. And like I know every different tribe is a bit different, but going back to that concept of just animals being revered and also having some sort of connection to them. I can't speak to all of them, but one of the ones that I wanted to share was the horned toad. So for Navajos, there's this horned toad. It's just this little lizard guy. But I remember as a kid, we would see them, and like if you could catch one, you would pass it around to all your family members, and you would rub it on your heart 4 times, and then you would let it go. And I found a really great diagram because one of the things horned toad is a protector of is lightning. So it's supposed to protect you from lightning. And one of the markings on its back, it's a little line like down his spine that kind of breaks out across its body. And when you look at it, it looks like a lightning strike. So a lot of, and then like on the side, you have these little spikes, and they call those spikes arrowheads. So that gives it that protective quality.
They
And
also shoot blood out of their eyeballs.
wait, do they really?
Yeah,
A horned
yeah.
cat?
That's a defensive mechanism. They squirt blood out of their eyes at their enemies.
Don't ask it for things.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
they've never done that to me. Oh my gosh, that's
Yeah.
freaky. That's freaky. Well, and yeah, so anyway, but for us at least, it's a really nice. We call him grandfather, and I don't know. I just thought it was kind of an interesting thing that you would have markings of an animal be so observed and then transform into like abilities of the animal. And I just wonder if that's something that existed way, 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 way back.
Well, you got to think too that in those specific areas, that animal is completely tailored and custom for the environment, right? So it's highly evolved to survive perfectly in that very arid, inhospitable environment. And so there's probably a little bit of something recognition of that, the fact that it's so integrated with nature that even in this really harsh environment, it still thrives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see that. And I think it's interesting because people get down on like neo shamanism and people saying like spirit animals is cultural appropriation or whatever. But I mean, like the Celtic have animal zodiacs, and I
Yeah,
think like every
all
culture,
cultures. Yeah.
yeah, they all have some sort of like tie-in to just animal energy. And like you said, even psychology.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about it too.
Californians have emotional support animals. That's not
There it is.
familiar. I'm not
Oh shit,
sure what is.
dude,
That is cultural appropriation.
What?
awful. But no, but I thought it was so interesting because getting onto the yeah, that's a real, yeah, so like in the way that a familiar would offer protection or give power, yeah, you're totally right. An emotional support animal kind of does that. You also have animal oracles. Nick had mentioned the Groundhog Day groundhog.
Mhm.
There's also Paul the octopus, who was known to have predicted the results of football matches.
And he
And
was right.
he was. He
Mhm.
totally was. He got worldwide attention as an animal oracle, and that's in modern day.
Yeah.
And so, like, if
He's
that's not a
he's
familiar,
well, I mean, Paul, I mean, octopi don't live that long, so they alternate Paul out. But I think he does the World Cup, so they have him predict the World Cup winner every time there's a World Cup.
so freaking adorable.
Mhm.
Oh, little octopus. But how does he do it? Do you know?
They have little balls with all of the flags in his tank, and then he takes one of the balls and puts it in like a little bin. And so
Wow.
he's been pretty accurate. I think he's probably got like maybe a 50 or 60% rate.
But
So
see, and like, if it's
not
not
bad.
even the same one, so he's reincarnating, or it's the same
Possibly.
spirit.
I mean, Puxatani isn't the same one. We've
Yeah,
had
it's the
Puxatani
same
Phil for like
spirit.
over 100 years. So
They are familiars, 100%.
yeah.
You were gonna say Mike, or?
No, keep going.
Oh, okay. So I guess just all of that discussion, because we are close to wrapping it up here. Just kind of wanted to take a walk through the world and through time at just our relationship with animals, and having kind of seen familiars as things that protect us, things that can predict things or give power. Nick and Mike, would you say you've ever had a pet that you could look back on and call a familiar of sorts?
I mean, yeah, all pets are familiars. I mean, like we're really like the concept of a familiar is just this connection that you have with the old sort of animus of nature, you know. So
Mhm.
like any pet that you have can be considered that. Now, if we're talking about like, do I think that my, turtles Leonardo and Raphael when I was a kid were demons? I don't think so. But I did have a cat that was really annoying, so maybe her name was Paisley, and she didn't really
Oh,
like me that much. So,
oh. How about you, Mike?
Um, I mean, I've had pets, but I wouldn't say anything like I've stepped into esoteric relationships with them. Uh, I would have stranger interactions with wild animals. Like I've had hawks let me walk up to them or I could pet them for the most part.
What?
Just like wild hawks.
I'm so jealous. What?
I've also had crow. This crow though was a little bit of a trickster. He ran with me for like half a mile.
What?
He kept jumping, but I'm a little suspicious because I had 2 little ankle bracelets, like tags.
Mm-hmm.
But
Birds aren't real, man.
birds aren't real. Those are
What?
drones.
Those are
What?
drones.
Those are CIA
Stop.
drones.
Oh my
Messing with my
God.
head, man.
Yeah, exactly.
You need to explain. What?
So
Now,
there's a bunch of birds that died in like this is like the early 2010s, and the idea was that for mass surveillance and the CIA or the deep state, whatever, was having bird drones fly around because you're not going to try to like kill a pigeon. You would never suspect a pigeon as a drone or a crow as a drone.
wow.
It's kind of a meme just to illustrate how far conspiracy theories go. Like now people are saying birds aren't real and, space is fake. It's another meme.
I'm just saying, this is making our superstitious pigeon shirt all the much more desirable. Guys, I bought one. You can buy one too at thinkgreen.space. But no, I think that's really interesting. And I was looking on some of like the Wicca sites, right? Because I was trying to bring it back to witchy stuff. And some of the tips that they have when it comes to familiar, one of the ones I liked is that it could be any animal that your energy calls out to, so you have like a special connection with it. I also liked that it was animals that would just appear to you, just kind of like you didn't go buy it at a pet shop or something. Like it came to you. And for me, like that probably would have been this little tabby cat that I had when I was a kid. And this is before I was allergic to cats, but she just showed up one day. Like I literally can't remember when it was. And she just hung around and she kind of would just follow me everywhere. And there was like a deep relationship with my cat. She's my little buddy. And I think that in a lot of ways, these familiars, when you look back at some of these cases, when you had witch trials, I mean, they're animals that give comfort. And I think like, if you do anything after listening to this discussion is just to kind of look at your animal and remember that like it's a wild thing and like to what extent it chooses to hang out with you and that you can train them to do things is kind of weird. And my personal pet, our dog, we were saging the house the other day and she does not like sage, which is kind of what started this whole conversation. I started to wonder if she's a little demon dog. So just, I don't know. Be curious because you have to wonder. Do animals do you think animals have souls?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think everything kind of has a
Has a little
soul
soul.
of essence of its own. Sure. I mean, I would definitely believe the more sort of animist sort of belief. Kind of like the Force. Everything. If there is some sort of creator or creation architect or whatever, I think that it has to permeate everything that exists. So I
The
would definitely.
logos in Greek. I forgot what in Aztec is it the total? I may be getting the word wrong, but it's the same idea that there's this spiritual energy that flows through every living and non-living thing on Earth. But yeah, no, I definitely think animals have spirits. Definitely you can connect to animals. Like I had a kitten for a while that I was really connected to, and for some reason, like just playing with that one kitten versus the others in the litter was so much easier. Like, things just flowed more. Like there was an understanding between me and that one specific kitten.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's a real thing.
I think so. Well, and I like the idea that there's this kind of spirit that flows through all living things because that would seem to corroborate the idea that you could have a daemon or a spirit that would kind of come and go through an animal or a human. And if it shapeshifts, it could just be that same spirit's being recognized in different creatures. But I also think you were saying something about the kitten, and it made me think of something else, but I kind of lost it.
Kittens are cool.
Kittens are cool.
I miss that cat. It was a wild kitten that I saved. Like there's a pack of just these little newborn kittens. No, like in the area where I was at, it was known for people to pick up cats and torture them,
Oh,
which messes up a lot of the familiar stuff, and or at least should be some sort of bad omen in my opinion.
definitely.
But I was able to pull them out of the side of like this really old garage, and it was cool. Got to keep them for a few weeks before sending them over to the vet for adoption and that sort of stuff.
Well, poor thing. Well, I'm glad that it had a little friend for a little while. But so I guess when it comes just to one last thing about animals, have either of you had an encounter with a wild animal that made you feel like that visceral kind of like I'm connecting with something right now?
That hawk.
That hawk.
I don't know. Probably not. I don't see a lot of wild animals.
Not even up in Shasta?
I mean, like I saw an eagle take a rabbit once, but that's about it.
That's pretty epic.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty cool.
Rabbit.
But I don't think it was doing it for me. I just think that I happened to be in the right place at the right time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess I just think on like a smaller level, Babe, the movie with the farmer and he's got the pig that doesn't want to be a pig, wants to be a sheepdog. And there's a line where the pig picks up Babe and they stare at each other, and it just says the pig and the farmer regarded each other. And I don't know why, but that always has been one of my favorite lines because, you know, just like you can with a human, with an animal too, just take a moment the next time you hang out with one or see one and just take a minute and regard it and just see what you think about its spirit or what it may be kind of conveying to you, and give us a comment about whether or not you think familiars are real or if you've ever had experiences with them or you want to add to the conversation. I definitely kind of enjoyed just taking this little dive with you guys for sure. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, well, this was great. Really well done, Ayla. Yeah, that was a fun conversation. So, yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
It was awesome. I want a dog though.
Dogs are pretty cool, man. I can't complain with ours. Oh, shoot. And I just realized I had a photo slide for the conversation, but I'll have to just put the photos in the comments maybe. Because I don't know how to get them to you. But yeah. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Ayla, and thank you guys so much for listening. We really appreciate the time that you took with us. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. I definitely did. I think it was a lot of fun. And I look forward to the next conversation Ayla curates for us in the future.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for listening again, you guys. If you could be so kind as to visit us at thinkering.space and check out the merch shop. Because we finally got that tied to our website and we're very excited about it. We have all the official shirts for all the official shows. We also have a couple mugs and, of course, our superstitious pigeon shirt, soon to be followed by the demon ferret shirt, I'm sure, at some point.
Demon ferret shirt.
All of this and more at thinkering.space. Please give us at Exofathom a like and a subscription on YouTube. That would really help us a lot. I know, you guys probably hear people begging for subscribers and stuff all the time, but if you do enjoy this, please consider subscribing to us on YouTube. That's youtube.com/Exofathom. We're also on Facebook, facebook.com/Exofathom. We're also on Instagram, instagram.com/Exofathom. Please let us know what you thought. If you have any questions or answers to some of the questions that we might have posited, we look forward to hearing from you guys. And until then, you stay out there, Cognonauts, and we will catch you on the next Exofathom. Good night.
Peace.
Later.